everybody's in a very cheerful mood today, or either a chatty mood, but that's great. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Community Development Housing General Government Committee meeting for today. Today we have 11 consent items and we have 3 general agenda items. And as the normal process, we will take our consent agenda first, and I would ask any council members or committee, are there any consent items that you would like to have removed? And the first thing too is, before that, we have 5 items on our housing demolition properties list. Is there anyone here for those properties at all? Address on Patterson, Sprague, Union Cross, Wentworth, and Teresa Avenue. Anyone?
Sprague Street, 1103.
Number's that?
C7.
C7, okay.
Okay, if you'll just hold up for a moment, please. Outside of C7, is there anyone else, Councilman Vester, anyone that has anything that they want to pull from the consent?
I'll move approval of the balance of the consent agenda except for C7.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that the balance of the agenda is approved. May we all vote? And
We didn't get to vote.
mine didn't come up.
There we go. Now we got it.
Mine's not up. Now.
Okay.
They had to get the right person to
The
make the
Russian.
motion.
The ayes have it, and it's unanimous.
What property?
Now we will have item, Ms. Richmond, 7, to come up and explain or give us a backdrop of this property, please.
Item C7, Richard Settle and Tony Settle,
The
1103.
Excuse me, City Secretary. The Community Development Housing Department would do their presentation first, and if the council has any questions or concerns, and then we can have you up to hear from you as well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Item C7, Richard Settle and Tony Settle, 1103 East Sprague Street, located in the southeast ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Richmond. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development Office.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Adams, if I could just briefly also give an update of the backlog cases.
Absolutely.
So this first slide that you see, this was what was presented to staff, or staff presented to the mayor and members of City Council back in the latter part of 2016. We have gone through the backlog of cases. So this slide that you see, the blue represents what our update for June. The orange color or reddish color that you see on the slides represents our update as of August. And the green shows what we've done as of this month, October. So what this basically shows that the repair and closed of those 629 cases, we've been able to save more properties, of course, than have properties demolished. Under the demolished category, we did go from 49, 62, and 68. You'll see those cases, or some of those cases again when you review the demolition assessment that you all approve later this month or next month. We do have some new owners, and you'll see that as the third category. The third category represents people who have purchased properties, and those people have those properties under repair. And again, this is from that 2011-2015 backlog. The due diligence and the demo process initiated, those are in various stages dealing with some maybe civil citations, that sort of thing. And then, of course, we don't have, at the bottom there, we don't have any more 2011-2015 cases to bring to you at this point. So that is the update on that backlog. And, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, could you explain again the council consideration piece of 66 houses in June, like, where did they go? What did we do? Did we send them back to be repaired and they got closed out, or they got demolished?
That's correct. It's a combination of those.
Okay.
Most were repaired and closed, and then there were a few that were demolished.
Okay. And the number of 629, that's for really where we are right now, as you say, to date from June 1st?
Well, the 629 was the original number for the cases that were brought to you starting in the early part of 2017 up until now.
Okay.
So we've cleared out the backlog. We don't have that 629 figure anymore.
Okay. And we had the 400 and something that's been repaired closed.
Yes, the ones that have been repaired, which is the latest color, is that green color, and those have been repaired and closed.
Okay. All right. And for council, just so you would know, this is part of that information update that I've asked the Housing and General Government Community Development before every committee meeting, and it would help too if you begin to send that out. Okay. So that everybody can, but now we understand. It wasn't explained to us, but I knew. This kind of brings it all in more of a focus and a data range of us working on all of these houses. We just got back, Sharon and I, from Atlanta a week or so ago. Everyone's home, and one of the main things, focus of this national convention conference, there were over 1,000 individuals there representing different cities, developers, contractors, inspectors, housing authorities. Anybody that's doing housing right now in America understands that we do have a crisis right now. And the fact that we have this, we were able to show them in the presentation because Winston-Salem was on a panel with Indianapolis and San Antonio of the progress we've been making, and most cities realize that our main focus is if we're not building the units that we need, that we're at a deficit in affordable housing, then we've got to now be more proactive in working to repair, sell those houses that fall to the city that we can versus demolition. And I'm kind of glad to see where we are because I remember where we were.
Right.
And I want to thank staff and inspections department and everybody else in working to make this available to the council. Thank you. Councilor Scipio.
Ms. Richmond, I know this was the backlog of 626 through from 2011 to 2015. Is it a correct assumption that we're on target with all of the cases that came from 2016 to now, that we are actually current?
Yes and no. The whole time that we brought cases from the beginning of 2017, we started in February. I think some of you may remember that we had, I think the first meeting we had 150 cases that were brought before you. But during that time, all of 2017 and 18, we have trickled in also cases that are from 2016 up to now. So we haven't only just brought you those.
And about how many of those
We have
cases?
we have all the old cases from 2011 to 2015 are virtually gone. Since then, we have about 300 properties that we're looking at right now. Some of them are actually being repaired, hopefully as we speak. People have come in to sign voluntary demolition agreements, which means that they are going to repair the house within a certain 90-day period or 120 days. So that's where we are now with those cases. And now we'll start to bring you more of those cases between 2016 and 2018. As you can see from your history page, on the history page there is a section that says that we can bring a property to you after it's been vacant for 6 months with the problems. So some of the cases in 2019 you won't see just yet because we do have to wait that 6-month period.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember McIntosh.
The demolished category, is that a cumulative number? So in green, is that the
Yes.
total? That's just, okay.
Yes.
Accretive. Okay.
68 is the total.
Great. Thank you.
And if any of the council members have some ideas that you want to see that can make this very simple, easy to read, and understand where we are, because this is a critical piece to our housing strategy for the city. Okay? Okay. Councilmember Larson.
I appreciate that. I think it would be useful to know, follow up on Councilmember Scipio's comments about how many cases we currently are processing. If they have a case file that they're working on, if we could monitor that on the front end, and then we could know, some of them obviously come to us, some of them are in the process, whatever, but if we're monitoring the whole universe of housing, it'd be nice to have that as well.
Thank you. Councilman Clark, you have anything?
I'll just say, we've had a mountain to climb, and I think we've done a very good job doing it.
I know.
And as Mr. Larson says, if we can maybe start another page that looks kind of like that of the current ones. And I know at some point you got to draw a line and pick the next batch.
Right.
Sure.
And let's follow those. Maybe 16, 17, and 18 might be a good batch.
Absolutely, and that's how we know it's a 300 number, because we have been monitoring those.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
I'd like to give a shameless commercial to community development because they've cleared the backlog. We are now receiving applications for our housing rehab loans, and I congratulate you for taking care of that backlog, because now we can start rebuilding and refreshing and renewing some of our communities.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Richmond, if we can move on to C7.
Okay. This case is, as the city clerk has mentioned, is Richard Settle and Tony Settle, 1103 East Sprague Street. The case number is identified, and it is in the Southeast Ward. The due process has been done for this property. There are a total of 35 violations. The list pendants that we took to the county clerk's office was filed on February the 15th of 2019. The first hearing was held January 30th of 2019, and the repair and vacate order expired February the 14th, 2019. So this became eligible, and this is where that 6 months comes in. So between February and there is a waiting period after the repair and vacate order expires. So it became eligible for your consideration in September of 2019. The estimated cost to repair the structure is $22,415, and the fair market value of the structure is $10,000. This is the property. You have photographs in your packet, and the property, those are recent pictures, so the property still looks like that, of course, today. I have talked to Mr. Settle, and he did email me to let me know that he just needed 3 months to make the repairs on this property. I have a copy of the email, I think, with me. If you approve the property for demolition, then he will automatically have 3 months.
Thank you. Sir?
She's explained everything.
Come on up.
But you can come up and give us your name and address. You can make a couple of comments.
Richard Settle, 1103 Sprague Street. I have been working on making the repairs that are on that list. We have got a lot of the work on the inside done. I have not had a chance to do the outside work yet. And the person that is helping me do the repairs said that he's going to need another 3 months to finish up on the inside and do the outside repair. And so I ask you to not to destroy the property. I am going to get it back in living condition. It's just going to take me a few more months to do it. Okay?
Thank you. Committee, any comments? Councilmember Clark?
I would recommend we hold it in committee for 3 months. My concern with giving the automatic demolition, if someone forgets the time limit or something. So if we could hold it for 3 months and look and see what progress has been made, would be my recommendation.
Is that a motion?
I'll make that a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to retain this property in committee for 3 months. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Voting yes, I'm sorry. My other meetings don't have electronic, it's aye. All those opposed, the yeses have it. Thank you so much. And, Ms. Richmond, do you feel a need to follow up with the gentleman, your department, to make sure everything is on point, or is that his responsibility?
Yes, we already have his email in our file that says he wanted 3 months, and so that was the email that I actually sent him today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Clark.
What we voted, we're just gonna hold this item in committee for 3 months, and then we'll talk about it again in 3 months. Okay? Yeah, that'd be fine. Keep us posted. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now we will move to the general agenda item, general agenda, which has 3 items. And would the secretary please read the first item?
Item G1, estimated timeline and cost to change the name of the city fair.
Mr. Rao, you've been on this one a while, haven't you? You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Adams, members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
On August 19th, the mayor and the council adopted a resolution to change the name of the Dixie Classic Fair of Northwest North Carolina. Last month, staff brought 2 resolutions. One, to make the name change effective with the 2020 fair, and then also to recommend a name at the time, the Twin City Classic Fair. At the time, this committee moved forward the resolution to make the name change effective with the 2020 fair, but then decided to keep the discussion of the name change in committee, and at the time requested some additional information about how we would actually implement the name change. So the information item that is before you today first does provide the list of the names that were suggested during the public input process. We did group them into 3 categories, names that had more of a regional appeal, because that was part of the feedback we received about the Twin City Classic fair name, was that it didn't have that regional reach. Then also a group of names that had more of a local preference, and then finally just a 3rd category of just various other names that were suggested. But to talk a little bit about the implementation and the timeline. So what we're looking at is, in November, a number of the national and state associations that we are a part of and attend the conferences for, they publish directories and information about fairs across the country. And that is an opportunity for us then to put our fair into those publications. And so that, obviously, that deadline is approaching very quickly. So that would be really the kind of the first milestone in our timeline for implementing a new name. At the same time, we would start working on our website and redirecting folks away from the dcfair.com website, and we would start working on a new logo. So the timeline that I provide, I'm not going to go through each of the details, but there's various points along the way throughout 2020 that we would be making the name change. Probably the most significant and busiest month would be in March, when we would start actually making physical changes at the fairgrounds to replace signage, to repaint, to really put the name and the logo out there on the facilities. So that's kind of roughly the timeline to get us in position for the 2020 fair, which would take place starting in October 2nd of next year. As far as the cost of implementing the change, so currently in the fairgrounds operating budget, we have $230,000 budgeted for advertising and marketing. And in addition to that, we have about $65,000 budgeted for supplies. And those 2 line items are used to develop the marketing plan each year, to print calendars, all the various things that we produce for promoting the upcoming fair. So those line items, those resources would be available for those similar kind of expenses associated with the fair name change. It wouldn't really require new money to develop a marketing plan with the new name, or to print ribbons with the new name. Those things are already expenses that we anticipate every year. But as I noted in the timeline with those fiscal changes, there are one-time costs that we would incur to implement the new name, and mainly the changes in the facilities. And in the information item, we provide a detailing of that, the painting, the signage, those types of things, and that totals about $97,000. We would utilize the fairground reserves to cover those one-time costs. Right now, at the end of fiscal year 2018-2019, we had a little over $2 million in fairground reserves, so we feel that we can certainly cover $97,000 in one-time costs. So that's really kind of the broad strokes of what the implementation plan would look like in terms of the timeline and in terms of the costs. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Any committee members have any questions? Councilman Mississippi.
Mr. Rao, were you able to find out if our grandstand was unique to our fair or not?
So we know that the State Fair has a grandstand type facility. We know that other fairs may have, those types of structures, but probably not something on the scale of what we have.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
So the first deadline that's critical is getting into this national publication.
Yes, sir.
And we have to submit that by when?
So probably in early November.
Okay, so if we want to get in the national catalog, we need to keep moving forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Beth.
No questions. I have comments when you're ready.
Okay. Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the branding and the logo and the rolling out of the nomenclature, the name of the fair, which presumably we're going to get a name pretty quickly. But I'm looking at the schedule, and I'm wondering, as we look at trying to define the image of the new name, if that's not going to be revealed until March and we're already going out into publications and branding, if we don't need to accelerate the branding or the imaging a little later than March.
So, Councilmember Larson, part of the plan would provide initial concepts of the logo so that we can get our new name into these national and state publications. I think
we're going out with a website in February.
Correct. That's correct. So, it could be that we would have it ready before then, but the unrolling the website would be something we kind of gradually develop.
And right now, we're planning to do the branding in-house, or is that out in contract?
As far as developing the logo, it hasn't been decided yet whether we would do it with a contract or whether we do it in-house. I think personally we have the talent to be able to develop a logo with our in-house marketing, but that has not been decided at this point.
Yeah. I'd just be I'm anxious to see, as we roll this name out, how we market visually, and I think that's going to need to be a priority pretty quick.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, questions? I'm going to, Councilman Clark, I'm going to have to get a motion. Can I get a motion?
I'm going to talk 2 seconds and I'm going to make a motion.
All right.
First off, I have not been here for the 2 votes on the fair. I just want to go on the record. I was in India for 8 days and China for 8 days. Those were meetings planned well in advance. I have my passport if you'd like to verify that. And I can assure you had more fun here than I did there. But anyway, I have a day job, and on an infrequent basis I do leave the country, but it was unfortunate. I have given a lot of thought on what name I'm going to throw out. I do think there was some very legitimate points made in it. It needs to be a broad name. The Winston-Salem Fair, the Twin City Fair, I think are more are not broad enough. So we got to start somewhere. So I would like to make a motion that we name it the Carolina Classic Fair.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor that has been properly seconded. All of those in favor, let it be known by voting. Oh, discussion. I'm sorry. Councilmember McIntosh, I'm sorry.
Having gone to one of the North Carolina Big Four colleges, Wake Forest University, located here in Winston-Salem, when I hear Carolina, I think Chapel Hill, and I think blue. We've got Winston-Salem State here. We've got Salem College. Not to mention the other big North Carolina schools. I think people who live in Winston-Salem, they went to NC State, went to Duke. Carolina has that connotation of that's those people down in Chapel Hill. To me, that's a little too broad. That's the entire state. I don't think when you say Carolina Classic, you could be talking about anywhere in the state of North Carolina. Piedmont is the region that we draw our clientele from. Piedmont has history in the area from the days of Piedmont Airlines. I'm just throwing my 2 cents in. I'm all in on Piedmont Classic.
Councilman Best.
Yeah. Direct point and then a broader discussion. I think that you would have had a stronger argument that when people saw Carolina, they thought UNC in our area before the Carolina Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes, and not to mention the Carolina Thunderbirds. It's no longer, I mean, we're from an earlier generation in which there were no professional sports to speak of in the state of North Carolina, and it was all about the college rivalry, and it was all about, what became the ACC rivalry. You can get that connotation, but I don't think it's the predominant one with the general public anymore. And Carolina is a broader term, especially when it's not connected with sky blue. I think that would be an important part of the branding to have it more general. Just as if you went a little bit south from here and you said Carolina, people would think Gamecocks if you made the logo predominantly red. So we can avoid both.
Maroon and black.
Both, pardon?
Maroon and black.
Excuse me, maroon and black. But that's certainly a reasonable consideration that I think deserved the direct response. On a broader basis, the reason I like Carolina Classic more than Piedmont Classic, Piedmont Classic doesn't really have a local historical tie-in. It's the region. It's kind of generic, and it would be sort of the non-controversial, offend no one, make no tie-in to the local history option. The reason I like the Carolina Classic option is because specifically of the local historical setting. Like most of us here, I grew up in the South. I lived through part of the segregated era and saw what happened to community institutions at desegregation. In Hickory, where I grew up, the high schools were the classic example. There was in Hickory a city high school named Claremont Central High School, and that's where the white kids went. There was a city high school called Ridgeview High School, and that was where the non-white kids went, mostly African Americans. At desegregation, what happened? Claremont Central stayed the city high school. Ridgeview High School closed, became an elementary school. That kind of loss of African American institutional heritage took place during the desegregation era across the South, I think. It certainly happened here in Winston-Salem. It happened with the fairs. One of the things that we learned from the deep dive review of the naming of the fairs in Winston-Salem is that Dixie Classic as a name dated from 1956. At the time it was named, it was the segregated whites-only fair. The other large fair, a fall fair, agricultural fair in Winston-Salem, was the Carolina Fair. And that was open. It wasn't segregated to whites only. It primarily served folks coming from the African-American community in Winston-Salem and the area. When the Dixie Classic Fair was desegregated, it picked up, ultimately, over a period of just a few years, most of the attendance that had been going to the smaller, less well-funded Carolina Fair, which ultimately closed. When the city came into ownership of the fair, the city at that time simply retained the Dixie Classic Fair name unchanged, and that part of the community's more diverse heritage was lost. I didn't initiate this renaming process, but now that the decision has been made to rename the fair and to make it effective next year, I will weigh in on what I think is a potential value of the whole process, and that is having taken a deep dive look into the history of our community with institutions, and as they affected this particular institution, the big regional fall agricultural fair. This presents an unusual opportunity to celebrate the diversity of our historical heritage locally by retaining the classic and by adding the Carolina Classic. Essentially, we recognize the diversity of that history and recognize the shared diverse history of our community. That's why I like it better. It's a history lesson in addition to a good regional name.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark, then Councilmember Larson.
I'll just say for the record, North Carolina, and before it was North Carolina, it was Carolina, both Carolinas. It's named after the wife of King Charles I of England. Charlestown was named after him, later become Charleston. And Caroline was his wife, and that's what Carolina is named of. And I think we can assume that the logo will not have sky blue in it, or a number of other colors. But I do think it's a compromise. And no matter what we come of it, no one's going to be happy.
No.
But we got to start somewhere.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. This fair is a regional fair. It's not a Manio to Murphy fair. It's a fair that has a specific draw to it. I'm a Gamecock. Carolina means something entirely different to me, obviously. And if you want to put Gamecock chickens on the logo, I'm all for it. The idea of a distinctive name that is neutrally accepted throughout an area, inclusive, is the word Piedmont, and it's been around for quite a while. Ever since I think colonial times, this area has been defined by that term. It's a unique term. It's descriptive of our geographical area, and it's something that I think we can be very proud of because it identifies a specific part of the state of North Carolina that we particularly reside in, and I tend to think we excel in. So Piedmont, to me, is a name that I'd like to keep in the landscape. We've lost it in the airlines. We've lost it in a few other places. But it still resonates, I think, within this community. And this is a way to, I think, lock it in as an identifying factor that makes us a unique part of the state of North Carolina and a unique part, obviously, of the fair world that exists. Carolina's a fine name. It's very generic. Everybody knows kind of what that is. Piedmont, it really markets itself as a unique experience, and that's why I would support that.
Thank you. We've had discussion. We've had a motion on the floor that I'm calling for the vote. All those in favor, vote yes for Carolina Classic. All those not, vote no. Thank you. The votes passed with 3 yeses and 1 no. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rao. We're looking forward to hearing everything else that you're going to be bringing us, and I'm looking for this to council to be, as we go to Monday, to get any other information that they need as to where do we go when it comes to this timeline, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item G2, presentation of results from 2019 resident survey.
Good afternoon, Chair Adams and members of the City Council. We have information item on the 2019 resident survey results. We have a presentation for you. My name is Scott Tesh, and I work in the City's Office of Performance and Accountability, and I have with me today Dawn Davis from ETC Institute, who is our third-party survey administrator. So I will be doing a part of this presentation, and she will be giving a part as well. And if I can get this to, there we go. So we want to give some brief background for the folks who might be watching at home, and also just generally to explain why we do resident surveys here in the city.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It gives us an opportunity to reach out to the community in a statistically significant way so that we can make generalizations about how the average population feels about specific programs and priorities in the city. We ask about what is most important to them. We ask about how well we're providing services. The survey itself is about 7 pages long and includes roughly 165 questions. Depending on who's taking it, we generally say it's 10 to 20 minutes in length, but it gives us an opportunity to ask questions about almost every service that we provide, We actually don't ask any questions about the fare, but all of the general fund services essentially are in there, as well as many of our main utility services. The information that we get back allows us to focus on improvements in service delivery. So if we see specific areas where residents have said that they're not happy with something, we can look at our strategies and address what are we doing or what do we need to do differently. We can identify clear priorities for strategic planning processes, and then also for resource allocation through our regular annual capital and operating budget processes in February through June. So we want to take that information from residents, learn what's most important to them, and then try to make decisions that help them see what we're actually doing in the field and the improvements we can make for them. As I said, Dawn is with me. She's from ETC Institute. This is the second year that they've done the resident survey for us. We have them, I believe it says, on a 4-year contract in the information item. We did a 1-year contract and then a up to 4-year extension, so it would technically be 5 years in total. ETC has a strong history of working with cities in North Carolina and throughout the nation, and with counties as well, to do these general resident surveys, as well as more directed surveys related to specific services, recreation, and those types of things. So they have just a lot of experience, and that was the main reason that they were selected last year, was because of their experience. They provide, as you'll see, regional and national benchmarks for the services that we look at, and they also provide what is a proprietary importance satisfaction analysis, which takes the way that residents rank how important a service is with how satisfied they are for it, and gives us an index of what we should really look at based on those two. Talk quickly about the marketing strategy. This includes both the random survey that ETC has performed and what we call the non-random component of the survey, which anyone could go out and answer. So the random one, you got something in the mail, we asked you to respond. Non-random was anyone can click on the link, anyone can get a copy of it from a rec center, or could call OPA or CityLink directly and get a copy. We did newspaper advertisements in the Journal, the Chronicle, and Cape Pasa. We did social media postings on Facebook, Nextdoor, and Twitter. We had physical billboard advertisements on streets and highways, and we also wrapped a WISTA bus that we found had the highest mileage going around town, and I believe even Mr. Garrity saw that at one point. So we did everything we could to try and get the message out there. We held open the non-random component of the survey longer to give people an opportunity to do it. We did only get about 175 completed surveys out of the non-random opportunity, where you'll see that we got more than 1,000 as required by the contract for the random survey. In terms of overall reach, we showed this last year. We hit about the same numbers we did last year. When our counterparts go out and do these in Durham and Raleigh and Charlotte, they are touching a significantly lower portion of their population. For this means we're getting responses back and talking to more people, but it also means that we have more statistical validity in the results that we get back. Our margin of error is plus or minus 3%, and most of the others are plus or minus 5% usually. So, overall demographics reflect the city very well. Ms. Davis will show you that. And again, received 173 non-random responses, which is lower than what we got last year, even with the additional advertising. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her go through the highlights of what came from the survey, and then we'll talk about some next steps after she's done.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Dawn Davis with the ETC Institute. As many of you may know, we've been in operation in the Kansas City area since 1982, and we've done work all over the country. And since 2007, we've surveyed more than 2.1 million people in 900 cities in 49 states. I'll go through the purpose, methodology, bottom line, major findings, summary, and then I'll turn it over to questions. The purpose of the survey: objectively assess resident satisfaction with the delivery of city services, to help determine priorities for the community, set a baseline for future surveys, and to compare Winston-Salem's performance with other communities regionally and nationally. As Scott said earlier, it was a 7-page survey. It took the average person 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It was accomplished by mail and online to randomly selected sample of households throughout the city. We received 1,036 completed surveys, and this also included a minimum of 100 surveys from each of the city's 8 council wards. And the demographics of the survey accurately reflects the actual population of the city, and with a confidence level of 95% and a margin of error of plus or minus 3% overall. As you can see by this demographic, the age is well represented, age ranges. Race, ethnicity, we have a good representation. Gender identity, we have good representation. Bottom line, residents have a very positive perception of the city. 84% rated the city as an excellent or good place to live. Only 6% gave a rating of below average or poor. And more than 3/4 rated the city as an excellent or good place to raise children. Only 9% gave a rating of below average or poor. When comparing Winston-Salem to other communities around the nation, the city rates much higher in more than half of the areas that were compared, 33 of the 63 areas. And satisfaction with the overall quality of city services rated 13% above the U.S. average and 11% above the regional average. The top priorities for the city to concentrate on over the next couple years: maintenance of city streets, traffic congestion, demolishing vacant structures, enforcing the cleanup of trash and debris on private property, ease and availability of on-street parking downtown, and overall efforts to prevent crime. First major findings: residents have a very positive perception of the city. Overall ratings, most residents feel that Winston-Salem is an excellent or good place to live, raise children, and work. When looking at the perceptions of the city, nearly 5-to-1 ratio of residents who are satisfied versus satisfied versus dissatisfied with the overall quality of services provided by the city, 63% versus 13%. With the exception of maintenance of city streets and sidewalks, less than 20% were dissatisfied with any of the other major city services. Fire services in particular, I think looks like about 1% dissatisfied. Major finding 2, satisfaction with city services much higher in Winston-Salem than other communities. When looking at comparing to the Atlantic region and the U.S., Winston-Salem is significantly higher as a place to live, raise children, and work. When looking at perceptions, the benchmarks, overall image of the city, quality of services provided by the city, and the overall value received for city tax dollars and fees are significantly higher than both the Atlantic region and the U.S. Average. Overall feeling of safety in the city is an area that needs improvement. When looking at the major categories of city services, solid waste and city water and sewer services are significantly higher than the rest of the country, while community services, code enforcement issues, public transit services, and maintenance of city streets and sidewalks rank below the national and regional averages. When looking at customer service from city employees, professionalism and courtesy of the employees, accuracy of the assistance given, and overall satisfaction with the way residents' concerns were addressed ranked significantly higher than the Atlantic and U.S. averages. When looking at top community priorities, when looking at police and fire department, the city's overall efforts to prevent crime and the visibility of police in neighborhoods are considered a high priority. Streets and sidewalks, the maintenance of streets throughout the city, and also the streets, neighborhood streets are considered very high or high priority with residents. Public transportation, very high priority for the amount of congestion on city streets and ease and availability of on-street public parking in downtown, while high priority availability of sidewalks throughout the city and cost of public parking options in downtown. In the community development area, demolishing vacant structures that are nuisance properties and enforcing the cleanup of trash and debris on private property are considered a very high priority with residents, while city housing rehabilitation programs and enforcing mowing, cutting of weeds on private property are considered high priority. Recreation and parks, the only high priority we see here are the city's youth programs and activities. Everything else is considered lesser priority in the parks and recreation side. Solid waste, the quality of brush pickup services and the quality of leaf collection services are considered high priority among residents. Some other findings, we asked about how residents get their information about programs offered by the city. Top resources, and in this case, local TV news, utility bill inserts, city website, and newspapers ran out the top 4. When asked how they prefer to get their information about city programs and services offered, city website is the #1 preferred source, followed by local TV news, utility bill inserts, and newspapers. In summary, residents have a very positive perception of the city of Winston-Salem. 84% rated the city as excellent, a good place to live, and 77% rated the city as a good place to raise children. Also, the city ranks much higher around the country than many cities around the country in 33 of the 63 areas that were compared. And the overall quality of city services ranked 33% above the U.S. average and 11% above the regional average. Again, top priorities for the city to work on over the next 2 years: maintenance of city streets, traffic congestion on city streets, demolishing vacant structures, enforcing cleanup trash debris on private property, ease of availability of on-street public parking downtown, and overall efforts to prevent crime. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for that information, and we can appreciate how simplified you made the delivery for everyone and for our constituents watching at home, that it was on the screen. I guess one of the things that I'd like to ask, I usually let them talk first, but I'm going to talk first this time. The city manager and my peers remember or know how I was very adamant about how we do surveys, making sure that we did everything we could to get the survey out, knowing statistically already how people respond to surveys. Even if they stop you at the grocery store and ask you to taste this and tell us how you feel, people be like, no. It's a time-consuming thing, but you're not going to get everybody, but it gives you a snapshot that you can use because it's data-driven. With that being said, again, I would like to see the information backed up against our strategic visioning meeting we have every year, but particularly the one we just had the early part of the year. I think, and what I can see is basically all I was going to say. See, you knew the answer to the question. Somebody told you.
There's a couple more slides to go.
Okay.
If you'd like me to go through this, we can do that and then take questions right after.
Okay, well, you should have put the questions slide there. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
We just following instructions. Go ahead, Mr. Tisch. We got you. Go ahead.
The question sides were
All right.
related specifically to her. So,
All right.
exactly what you're talking about. The slide looks at there were 19 priorities if you were to go through what Dawn had put together amongst where we ranked lower on the benchmarks or in those important satisfaction ratings that were higher, very high. And so we've essentially done here which focus areas they're in. You'll see quality transportation has the most of them. That's a little bit of a misnomer because we asked the question, how do you feel about city streets citywide? How do you feel about city streets or in your neighborhood? How do you feel about sidewalks citywide and sidewalks in your neighborhood? So you get double bunked a couple of times there. It shows as 7, but realistically more of them are actually in livable neighborhoods because those are separate questions. But as she showed, we actually have in safe and secure community, livable neighborhoods, and quality transportation, a majority of the issues that were brought up in the resident survey. In our current iteration of the strategic plan, which was recently updated, there are 5 direct action items related to those things in quality transportation, related to improving the integrated road network and city street maintenance, related to sidewalks and pedestrian improvements, implementing additional changes to fixed route and or looking at the data related to fixed route transit system. And there were 8 action items that were completed before February that actually addressed some of these as well. So we have completed items and we still have other items that we're working on that would be completed by the end of fiscal year 21. Same thing in livable neighborhoods. There are 12 action items that community development and recreation are looking at related to improving the character and condition of neighborhoods, housing programs, affordable housing, and then there were 7 action items that were completed before last February. And we'd be more than happy to show you exactly which action items were completed and which ones are still in progress as well. With safe and secure community, there are only 2 action items that are currently in the list, but police had 8 that they had completed before February of last year, many of them related to community engagement and involvement. Overall, when you look at this, we see action items related to 4 of the top 12 priorities. There were 16 that came out of the strategic plan update, and we see 4 of them directly reflected in what you have here today, related to affordable housing needs, streets maintenance, again, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and the transit system. So residents have come back, and at least a quarter of what's in the strategic plan, they are echoing right back to you through the resident survey. In terms of next steps, management will look at the current key work items that we have in the system, which include many of those strategic plan action items that are in progress. We want to work with departments, and OPA will reach out to individual departments so that they know what's in the resident survey, what are priorities, and they have an opportunity to look at potentially making budget requests for fiscal year 21 to align their resources with what they're hearing from residents. We will, at least in one place, and we'll talk with departments about performing additional targeted resident engagement for designated, when we say service areas, I mean solid waste. There was a question that Councilmember Clark had asked us to add to the survey, saying in the last 6 or 12 months, how often have you had a missed collection? That number came back. It was very interesting to us. We're going to reach back out to the people who said they had missed a collection and ask them what type of collection and potentially why they thought they had been missed. So we will try and reach back out and get more information on some of the services where we feel we were kind of blindsided by the information we may have gotten from residents. And then obviously come back either to General Government Committee or through another appropriate mechanism to discuss what are potential changes and strategies that we would be making. And you may see some of that through the budget process. So we may ask departments to submit to us resource reallocations to address some of the issues here or to look at other things in the strategic plan. Second questions and comments slide. Sorry about that.
Yeah. The one thing, and I'll get you, Councilman Scipio and others, I think we need to do a regular update. And I know everybody feels like as long as we're being given information that we should be okay. But we also understand that the constituents also feel like they do watch 13 or do by the news camera media here, that they need to see that we are following our path. Corporations and businesses, if they have a strategic plan or goals, we don't pull them out once a year. We pull them out at least every quarter to review and see where we are. So I would like for the city manager to look at that. Yes, sir.
We're actually, Ms. Martin, Mr. Tesh, and myself have started working on that, going through all of the accomplishments from when this plan was adopted in early 2017 through the end of this year. We'll be bringing you an update of all the accomplishments in the strategic plan as well as not in the plan. And just for convenience, we've broken that down by ward as well. So
very good.
That's going to be coming.
Very good. Councilman Scipio.
Yes, I'm happy that you have a large enough database to do some collective analysis. And I know the databases are small when we look at demographics and by ward. But I would love to see that because there may be some insights we need to gather by looking at those core demographics and also by ward. They may not be very significantly, statistically significant since you just have 100 in each ward, but it would be some insight. So I would very much like to see that.
We will provide that information to you, and we can do it both tabularly and we can map it as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Tesh. Councilman Clark.
I think, to me, the bottom line is we have only one area that we have significant poor score on, and that's, you can call it what you want, it's potholes.
Street
maintenance, streets and sidewalks.
Streets and sidewalks.
I have a sinkhole on Warwick Road that has had cones around it 6, 7 months. I'm just going to guess. That's just my example. The way to work it is we've got to have more crews, and we've got to write down when we get the call and when we fix it. And it can't be 6 to 7 months. It needs to be maybe 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. But the only way to solve that is we're going to have to spend some more money there, and I think that's a budget issue we need to address next March. And I do know we've had trouble getting workers in that area because that does involve mechanized equipment that you have to have operators for, and this, that, and the other. But if it wasn't, to me, that's the one glaring example. Now, there's some people you can't ever make happy, and I realize that. But that is certainly an area that we can make a big difference in. Thank you.
Councilman McIntosh, I think, did you have your hand up? No?
You had it first.
Councilman Larson.
Would like to.
I think we will see in the next year as interstate reopens that the road situation is going to radically change. Certainly South Ward has had the brunt of traffic problems picking up, running parallel to Business 40, and we're acutely aware of that problem. Let me first of all comment and thank my fellow council members and staff for commissioning these reports. I think they're incredibly useful. We're in the second year now. We've got 3 more years of data coming in. I do think it would be useful for us to now go with the third year, begin to map what we're seeing as far as statistically each of these categories. If we're measuring improvements within our police or in our roads or whatever, they should start showing up in our popular opinions of what we're doing. So if we could compare the first year, second year, third years to percentages that you're talking about, I would find that trend as some sort of justification of how effective we are. Obviously, there's going to be always a matter of perception versus reality as to what's getting done and what's not getting done. But I think as we try to measure the public's perception of what we're doing, this would be a good way to handle that. So if we could look at next year, another way to perhaps index the previous years involved. Thank you.
Councilman Beth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman McIntosh, then Beth.
I want to say I'm happy that we got such a high response rate, and overall I think I'm extremely happy that the overall feeling is that we're providing goods and services that people are happy with the way we're doing it. To me, though, an awful lot of this is about messaging. To go to Councilmember Clark's point, some people are never happy, and all those people are on Facebook, and we don't. I see things on here about people are very happy with the police department, and yet they're very unhappy about safety. So you got things sort of pointed in opposite directions. So much of this is about getting word out to people about what we've actually done, because I think in areas we get criticized for things that we really shouldn't be criticized for, and I think that shows up in the overall the way people are happy. But so I think messaging and just getting out things that are available that we provide that people don't know about, but also the quality of the job that we're doing. I don't think people hear that enough. So I think this is very informative, and thank you for your work.
Councilman Beth.
There are another couple ways that the data could be presented that I think might be useful for us. We get percentages. I wonder if we could get raw numbers on each question and each response. The statistical significance of an answer, of a set of answers, goes down as the total numbers go down. So that might tell us a little more. The other thing I think that would be very helpful is a geographic distribution. Take the top priority issues, for example, and are you getting a consistent pattern of where they're identified? I know that, for example, if we talk about leaf collection, the largest number of responses over a period of years has typically come from Councilmember Clark's area. I wonder if we're getting any kind of identifiable distribution pattern with street maintenance or downtown parking, for example. If we're getting a recognizable distribution pattern on more sidewalks, for example. Because if we are, then it might help inform our on-the-ground prioritization, saying, okay, we're getting more dissatisfaction, for example, with street maintenance in this part of the city, but we're not hearing from them on sidewalks. Is that, and we can at least look into, is that because they're mostly driving, or is that because they've got good sidewalks? And we're getting sidewalk requests, is that mostly from folks who've got holes and broken pavement on their sidewalks, or is that from where we don't have any sidewalks and we've got more people walking, or that kind of information?
So ETC provides us the data set. We'd be more than happy to break all of that down, geographic distribution by ward, and bring a report back or send it in a Thursday packet that could show you a lot of those major questions. Staff is also looking at, we know the downtown parking and is mixed in the same service area with the questions about fixed route transit. So we will be looking at a potential change to the survey tool to separate out transit services from infrastructure and other transportation-related services that we provide, so that you don't get an in of people, a response rate for people who don't know what transit is happening in transit, responding about transit services.
Yeah.
So we may make a change to the survey tool itself to help with some of that as well.
We've had a lot of that in the past, I think.
Well,
Thank you.
Very
thank you
helpful.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item G3, Human Relations Commission report.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
I sound like a frog today. I know I sound horrible, sorry. But I wanted to just introduce you to the chair of the Human Relations Commission, Chairman Robert Leake, and also the vice chair of the Human Relations Commission, Jeff Bloomfield. They, fortunately, will be providing you with today's annual report for the 2018-19 fiscal year.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm not going to bore you guys with all the information in the packet that you guys received, so we're just going to just give you guys some highlights in regards. Okay, in regards to our Human Relations Commission. One of the highlights that I'm going to start off first with is, I know it's been a very popular discussion around our city, especially in regards to fair housing and landlord-tenant. So we're going to provide some statistics for you guys in regards to some of the housing discrimination cases that the commission was able, and the staff and the commission were able to accomplish from 2017 through 2019. You guys can see on the 2017, from my left, it was 25 cases that they were able to investigators will solve. But in 2019, we're able to solve 80% of those cases and within the 100 days.
Excuse me a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you just reference the page in the
Oh, I'm
report
sorry.
so we could see it better on our laptop? I think
It's page 13. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
As well as you go down, you'll see the close of the 80%, the landlord-tenant cases within the 45 days. This year, we're able to close 85% of those cases. Maintaining average investigative time per landlord-tenant cases of 45 days or less, we're able to close 85% of those cases. You go down to the workload, you'll find the total fair housing discrimination cases processed. Last year, there were 14 cases. This year, we were able to solve 8 of those cases. Total landlord-tenant cases processed, there were 46 cases in 2017. This year, there were 60 cases that we were able to work as well accomplish and solve. Total forums and public discussions held in 2017, there were 71, and then in 2019, this year, there were 70 public discussions, forums as well. Some of our popular events that we've been able to conduct within the outreach of the community, of course, has been the Martin Luther King Breakfast with the Chronicle, the 38th Annual Human Relations Student Awards Banquet, which we recognize students across Winston-Salem and Forsyth County schools for their accomplishments throughout their schools in the school system. And then, of course, April is one of my one of my best months as well. Favorite months is April. It's the Fair Housing Month. It's, of course, that we had our 14th annual Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. Last year, of course, we're going into this will be the 15th year Fair Housing Affordable Housing Summit. And then, of course, last year was the first year we hosted the Gentrification Symposium under the Fair Housing Horizon Committee. And this year we're going to continue that Gentrification Symposium discussion as well, which will be on November the 13th, 2019. I'm sorry, November the 6th. I'm glad I got some help beside me. November the 6th, 2019 at Winston-Salem State University. I'm going to return the rest over to my colleague, Vice Chair Bloomfield.
So when Ms. Wanda first asked us to come up here and put this together, she said, just kind of put together a highlight of what you've done this year. And I looked it up, and we've actually touched 87 events and 13,363 attendees. So I had to break it down significantly for you guys. And so in March, we did our College Trust Talks, and we had 75 attendees through multiple schools throughout the region. And then in June, we continued our Trust Talk series with the disabled community at the Enrichment Center and had 60 attendees. We are planning a third Trust Talk for the end of the year for November, December. And I don't know if anyone's ever attended those, but they're usually always well attended, great discussions, great interaction with the police department. I can tell you the one at the Enrichment Center was very well received, and that community was very grateful to kind of get that interaction and come away with those perspectives. And then moving into September, we have our Cultural Diversity Month, where we do International Village. We had 4,500 attendees at International Village. And we do Race Equity Equality Week, which includes Fiesta and a number of other events that bring in nearly 10,000 to 20,000 visitors. And also, we do the Student Race Relation Forum in September as well. And then here in November again, we have our Newcomers Symposium and the Gentrification Symposium coming up on November 6th. And so those are our big highlights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, Dr. Abraha and the great Human Relations Board. It's kind of sometimes hard to fathom where Winston would be, Salem, without the Human Relations Board, because it goes so far back to Dr. Goodwin at Mount Zion. Took a lot of courage for the people that did this way back in the 60s and whatever, but it helps to bridge our communities, not just on race, but again on being inclusionary and diverse at the same time, for whatever that means. I would hope that in your Gentrification Symposium, that, and maybe you covered it last year, that again, just got back from a big housing conference, that was one of the major tracks that they had. And there was a kind of like a dichotomous discussion of displacement and gentrification. A lot of people sometimes think that gentrification just happens. Gentrification normally happens because somebody had to move. Mm-hmm. So somebody else could move in that wasn't like the people that was there before. So they stressed of how important it is now because of the mixed emotional responses we're getting to the quote unquote the word gentrification, that it's our responsibilities to help make it more understood amongst everybody that there are causes to gentrification that cause it. It doesn't happen on its own, but displacement is the main culprit. Yes, you want to comment, Pastor? I saw you jump up.
Oh, no, ma'am, I was just standing up here. Doctor?
And I totally concur with you, Councilmember Adams. And what we're looking at this year is solutions. We're looking at solutions and best practices, and we're focusing on the triad. Triad-wide, we have partners from High Point and Greensboro, not just Winston-Salem, and also from the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. They're going to be working with us as they did last year. Last year, we were doing more of identifying what the issues are. This year, we're trying to come up with some workable solutions. And so we're looking at it from a perspective of transportation, of legal consequences, of fair housing, obviously, and a lot of other intersections that people don't necessarily think of when they think of gentrification. And so we have a number of breakout sessions. We're actually working with the Urban League on it as well. Just trying to get every possible community perspective to make sure people understand that a solution to one person may not be a solution to another, because it's all about perspective and it's all about your experience.
James Perry, the CEO of the Urban League, he is a partner with the city and everyone home, the conference and all of this stuff that we're doing. And we'll be coming to you and others and present some of the findings that they found when they came to Winston And we went on blast nationally of some of our challenges that we have here in Winston, and one of them that I'm sure your department and the Human Relations Commission Board addresses. One of the things that I must say on a national level of these people, all of this 1,000 in Atlanta, Winston-Salem had the I won't say worse. Winston-Salem had the highest number of evictions that they had deep dived into with their legal people and other people from across the country. And I will hope that when, in the next month or so, we'll be meeting with you all and presenting to you what the findings, what they found, and what we can do to fix that. Because people tend to forget when a person gets evicted, it is worse than a bad credit report, because it'll affect the credit report. But what happens when people get evicted because of no job, loss of job, no money, whatever? It follows them for at least 3 to 5 years if they're not able to get anything to live in. So we're going to have to address that from the policy side and the legislative side as well. But it is a problem, but when they showed Winston-Salem compared to all of the other cities in the country, it didn't look good. Didn't look good.
Right. And For Every One Home will be one of the breakout sessions, actually, at the Gentrification Symposium next month, as well as opportunity zones and other issues as well. But also with evictions, just to speak on that, we see that it inadvertently and disproportionately impacts immigrants, refugees, and asylees too here in our local community. And so just putting in a plug for Thursday, we're doing the Newcomers Symposium, second annual Newcomers Symposium at Forsyth Tech's main campus. And they will be talking there about housing and, again, transportation, health, education, law, and how that impacts immigrants and the service organizations and agencies that serve immigrants, refugees, and asylees. And so that's another angle.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any comments?
Just
Yes,
real
Councilman
quick
Malone.
question. I've got the BIC Newcomers event on my calendar, but what time is it? What time does that start?
The Newcomers Symposium starts at 9:30.
Okay, and runs till?
And it runs until 4 o'clock. Yes. And it's at the Strickland Building on Forsyth Tech's campus.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all
Thank
for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more comments from the committee or council members? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.